So this is basically taking the diseases associated with the various kinds of bacteria and other things and just giving you a list of them. So, for example, anthrax is Bacillus anthracis. So disease of mammals, often deadly, caused by Bacillus species. Anthrax. Oops. Antibiotic-associated diarrhea actually is the Clostridium difficile or difficile, or however one pronounces that. Atypical pneumonia, mycoplasma, Klebsiella, viral pneumonias. Bacillary dysentery is caused by Shigella. So for example, disease caused by various Shigella species is the definition for that. I'm making sure that we go through these things so that you guys have some sense of what's coming. Bacterial obligate intracellular parasite of gram-negative bacteria. So that's the Delovibrio, the one that starts with the B. Bacterial vaginosis, so there's a number of them. When I think of it, I think of Gardnerella, but it's not just Gardnerella. So Gardnerella and Bacteroides and whatever Mobiluncus is and Mycoplasma. But really all you got to do is remember Gardnerella. That's the only place you're going to see Gardnerella.
Like Gardnerella has bacterial.
Yeah. It's just going the other way. Black Death is Yersinia pestis. Burn wound opportunistic pathogen is Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Childbirth fever is Streptococcus pyogenes. Cholera, that's an easy one. That's Vibrio cholera. Cystic fibrosis associated pathogens are Pseudomonas aeruginosa and Burkholderia. Diarrhea, okay, so that's a problem. Pardon the pun. Is that a pun? Who knows? So there's a bunch of them that are associated with diarrhea. So what should we remember here? So Shigella and Salmonella and some E. coli and I suppose Campylobacter. Giardia is actually not a bacterium, it's a protozoan. But if anybody remembers beaver fever, giardiasis, I mean diarrhea. So the trick is beaver fever is a nickname or whatever for giardiasis. Diphtheria is Corynebacterium diphtheriae, although I probably say it's associated with Corynebacterium species. Disease associated with a particular Corynebacterium species. So if you can associate Corynebacterium with diphtheria, which is something that would be good to be able to do, although people don't tend to get diphtheria anymore because of the vaccination, but that's what that would answer would be. That would be Corynebacterium, that would be Clostridium botulinum. Dysentery, so that's going to be another difficult one, but you're going to see Shigella associated with that, and also that Anamoeba histolytica. Earaches, Haemophilus, and other things. Epidemic typhus is Rickettsia prowazekii, or Prowazekii. In fact, I'll even show you that one. So Rickettsia prowazekii. Now there's another kind of disease associated with Rickettsia, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So you've got to be able to recognize the Prowazekii and say epidemic typhus. Food poisoning, so there's a number of different things that give food poisoning. Staphylococcus aureus, Bacillus cereus, particularly Bacillus cereus is a good one to memorize for that one because you're not going to find Bacillus cereus anywhere else in this list. Staphylococcus aureus gives you the kinds of food poisoning associated with potato salads and picnics, and Clostridium is Clostridium botulinum. And also perfringens. What was that?
That's why you never give a baby honey because they'll get
Botulinum, because the raw, not honey, but raw honey in particular.
not even honey nut Cheerios.
Really?
Well, they're not supposed to have nuts either. My kids ate
That's why
honey.
you shouldn't even
My
have
kids
kids.
ate
There's
honey
a
and nuts
problem.
all day.
So the problem with honey is that the Clostridium botulinum spores are able to germinate or survive in their gastrointestinal tracts because they don't have the acidic stomachs that the adults have. And therefore, you get germination of the spores, and you get the botulinum toxin, botulinum, being produced inside the baby. And, of course, it doesn't take much botulinum, especially when you're a baby, to give you flaccid paralysis, which is the consequence of botulinum toxin. Oh, food poisoning associated with canned goods, so that's Clostridium botulinum. Foodborne gastrointestinal infections. So this is worth talking about a little bit. So there's a difference between intoxications and infections. Staphylococcus aureus gives you foodborne intoxications. In other words, when you become sick having eaten that food, that potato salad, it's because there are Staphylococcus toxins in the potato salad. You don't even have to have the Staphylococcus to become sick. In fact, the same thing's true with Clostridium botulinum. It's the botulinum toxin that causes the disease, not the organism actually growing inside of you. But that contrasts with foodborne gastrointestinal infections, because here you actually have the organism replicating inside of you. And a good example of a foodborne gastrointestinal infection is caused by Salmonella. But there are others up here. So Shigella, you've actually got something growing inside of you. Escherichia coli and diarrheas, you have something that's growing inside of you. And also Campylobacter. So that's not a particularly easy one to do. Foodborne illness then takes that and all the other things. So this is going to give you all these various things plus the Staphylococcus, the Bacillus, the Clostridium, which are caused also by toxins. So that's not necessarily an easy one. And there are, however, a number of diseases, foodborne illnesses that are associated with bacteria, not surprisingly, I suppose. Gangrene is Clostridium perfringens, which is one of the terms that we have, one of the words. Gastric cancer and peptic ulcer is Helicobacter pylori. I've got this written down with either an ampersand or the and I may very well have it as part of the quiz with only one of these. So I think I've got it set up so if you put down peptic ulcer, that would be a sufficient answer. Gonorrhea is associated with Neisseria gonorrhea. Human infection acquired through, in fact, let's go to that one. I'm curious about, yeah, so it's a disease caused by a species of Neisseria.
That's also meningitis, though, too, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's more things that cause meningitis than cause gonorrhea, and that's the difference between the two.
Okay.
If I put sexually transmitted, I don't know. In theory, it would have been too easy. But I mean, seriously, if you're going to be a person who's a health person, health worker, I mean, it's good to know that gonorrhea is caused by Neisseria gonorrhea, and this will be something that you'll be seeing again. Yeah. Where are we? Human infection, bacterial infection acquired through animal bites, I believe, is Pasteurella. I have difficulty with that one for some reason. So disease caused by Pasteurella multicida. See, the specific epithets tend to be more difficult to pronounce than the genera. Leprosy or Hansen's disease is caused by Mycobacterium leprae. Lockjaw is caused by Clostridium tetani. That's another word for, lockjaw is associated with what's known as tetanus. Tetanus is a reference to basically when your muscles are flexed. And so tetanus as a disease is a toxin that gets inside of you and causes your skeletal muscles to flex and not relax. And so your jaw becomes locked. And you can even start breaking bones as a consequence of this. Lyme disease is our friend Borrelia burgdorferi. Meningitis, so there's multiple meningitises, not just Neisseria meningitis. So there's Haemophilus, there's also viruses.
Hey, that's well, that's me, right? Dennis, isn't that dumb?
The meninges
Yeah, you're drilling way too deep if you're hitting the meninges.
I thought that was like a disease of the gums. What's that called?
Oh, yeah, gingivitis. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I can see that, sort of. Meninges, gingivitis. Opportunistic infections. So that's another difficult one. So there's a whole list of things here. So there's Pseudomonas, there's E. coli, there's Candida. This is, you get Candida infections associated, for example, with antibiotic use. There's Clostridium difficile that gives you a gastroenteritis that's associated with antibiotic use. So these are basically organisms that tend to be in association with us but tend to not hurt us. But if the organism finds itself in the wrong place at the wrong time, it can actually cause disease. Or if the organism is present in too high concentrations. So that's not an easy one. There's a lot of them. Plague, actually plague and Black Death are the same. That's Yersinia pestis. Rheumatic fever is associated with Streptococcus pyogenes. Rocky Mountain spotted fever is associated with Rickettsia rickettsii. Named after Dr. Ricketts. Dr. Ricketts was like, hey, this is my species. Scarlet fever is also Streptococcus pyogenes. Sexually transmitted diseases. So when you see this list, it should be very obvious to you that we're talking about sexually transmitted diseases. So chlamydia trachomatis, chlamydia, Gardnerella causes a vaginosis. Neisseria gonorrhea causes what? Treponema pallidum causes syphilis. Trichomonas causes a vaginalis, and then there's various kinds of viral sexually transmitted diseases. I believe I've got it in the Carmen quiz that STD or STDs will also work for that one. Syphilis is Treponema pallidum, which is a spirochete. Trachoma is associated with chlamydia trachomatis. Tuberculosis, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Let's see what that one says. Probably says a lung disease associated with Mycobacterium. Disease affecting especially the lungs is associated with a species of Mycobacterium. Typhoid fever is Salmonella enterica typhi. Salmonellas are a pain. So a disease caused by Salmonella typhi. Technically, that's not supposed to be italicized, and it is supposed to be uppercase, because that's not the specific epithet. The specific epithet is enterica. So it's Salmonella enterica typhi.
So if we don't underline them on our test, do we get them wrong?
No, I take off a point.
So that's wrong.
Well, actually, I guess it is wrong. Maybe I'll take off less than a
Like
point.
half?
Yeah, maybe half a point. We'll figure it out. But yeah, I mean, when in doubt, just underline it. So I'm not taking points off if you start underlining things left and right. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. But you know, if you want to take the time to underline everything, if you want to be that paranoid, that's fine. Paranoia is good. Now that's another issue. I have had people argue that it's obviously it's in italics. That's why in that previous one I showed you, I had it italicized and underlined. I'm trying to go for a lack of ambiguity here. Typical pneumonia, so Streptococcus. It's not just Streptococcus, but Streptococcus, when you see that, you should be thinking typical pneumonia. Although there are other things caused by Streptococcus, but you'll note that it's Streptococcus pyogenes. So scarlet fever, Streptococcus pyogenes, rheumatic fever, Streptococcus pyogenes, also childbirth fever, childbirth fever, Streptococcus pyogenes.
Is typical, like, what about, like, strep throat? Is that?
Streptococcus pyogenes.
That's what I
But so the question was, what about strep throat? Streptococcus pyogenes is what causes strep throat. But streptococcal pneumonias are not caused by necessarily Streptococcus pyogenes. I don't even know if they are caused by Streptococcus pyogenes. So that's why just Streptococcus is there. Where is it? Typical pneumonia. So just Streptococcus. The atypical pneumonia, I have a link. So these are the atypical pneumonias, Klebsiella, Mycoplasma, et cetera.
What is atypical about them?
They're atypical because these are, so when a person presents with pneumonia, typically it'll be Streptococcus or a few other things. More rarely, it'll be these other things. And so they describe it as being atypical. One of the atypical pneumonias is walking pneumonia, which is caused by Mycoplasma. It's actually Mycoplasma pneumoniae, but I didn't put it there because that would be a giveaway of sorts. Urinary tract infections. So Proteus and E. coli are typical urinary tract infecting agents. But there's a whole lot of different things. Now this one I changed over the weekend to make sure that I included Klebsiella, because I got in trouble last week talking to somebody who said the three biggie, you don't even know what Enterobacteriaceae is. It's the family that includes E. coli and Salmonella and Yersinia, et cetera, et cetera. He said the three big urinary tract, Enterobacteriaceae, urinary tract infection causing agents are, and so I was able to say Proteus and E. coli. But I couldn't think of Klebsiella. And the reason I couldn't think of Klebsiella is because it doesn't say in your book that it causes urinary tract infections. And I checked my definition, and Klebsiella wasn't there. And I checked Wikipedia, and there was Klebsiella. So I changed this over the weekend. The reason it's important, though, is because I took out the underlines. So this one actually does not have the underlines explicitly shown there. It's a conflict in me. I don't want the underlines to be there because they look ugly. And underlining everything on your exam will look ugly too. But you know, I'm not going to discourage you. And then whooping cough is Bordetella pertussis. So if you've heard about the word pertussis, that means whooping cough. Or the pertussis vaccine, that's whooping cough. Now, I know these things aren't perfect. And you guys are going to be more effective at identifying imperfections in these definitions than I am. And so if you think that there is a need to modify these definitions in some way to make it, I don't want to say easier, but they have to be more meaningful for what they're trying to define so that they can be distinguished from other sorts of things, just email me. And I'll see if I can come up with a way of modifying the definition.